Welcome to Pimpy's Investment Chat, where we keep investment talk simple. And here's your host, Pimpy.
What is going on out there, peeps? Okay, I had mentioned this a couple of times that I was looking into worm farming. Come across the video and paid attention to it and found out there's actually an industry out there for worm farming. But more importantly, worms create a type of compost that is phenomenal for gardening. And so we've been wanting to do a lot more with our backyard and starting to do our own gardening. Besides that, worm farming is an actual business. There is a revolution starting to happen where people are getting away more and more from the type of fertilizers that we rely on so much over there in Russia. And you can see it's affecting farms all around the world. You have all those people pushing that climate crap, claiming, that the fertilizers are no good. They're not good for you at all. And that the cows' farts damage the climate. Then there is an alternative, one that's way better, much, much better. And that is worm fertilizer, castings from worms. So at first I was just thinking about doing it on my own. This would allow me an opportunity to get some really good compost and food for my plants. And then the more I started to learn about it, the more now I'm interested in doing it on a much larger scale. I was on Rice's show today. Shout out to Rice TV, I appreciate it. Somebody asked me, are there some industries that we can identify out there that we can actually financially benefit from during this crisis? Yeah, there is. If you're going to find a company out there right now that's going to fill the needs that people have that they can't get otherwise, with fuel prices going up, and it's going to only get higher. So you got diesel prices going up. People aren't going to be able to get supplies. They're not going to be able to get deliveries. So if somebody came along and found an alternative, and I'm not talking electric, another alternative way to get things delivered and to people safely, then that company would be successful. This one right here, I think, is slightly untouched. It has the potential to be big. And it's crazy because it doesn't take very much to do your own worm farming. These little suckers breed nonstop. Every, I think it is 13 weeks, they double in size. It might be quicker than that. But if they do that and you start worms and you're feeding them properly and you put them in a healthy environment, not only will they multiply in numbers that you can benefit from, but they also create the kind of compost that people are interested in buying in. And so I have reached out to a couple of my local farmers because, funny enough, some of the things that you feed worms are cow manure and horse manure and are different types of crops that come from different animals. And then they turn it into something a lot more healthier. So I've been speaking to this guy. He's got a horse ranch. He's given me permission to go out there and grab as many horse apples as I want to feed the worms. There's also a few farmers around here. I'm reaching out to them to see if there is a way we could do some type of testing on one or two trees or plants that they have out there, or a section where they could do their own comparison of the difference between using fertilizer and using the worm castings and see how the results come out. I've seen several people do them, and the results have always been phenomenal for worms. So I'm hoping to convince these people that indeed they switch from cow manure on over to worm composting. And if so, then I could provide a need for them. Also, there's a thing out there called microgreens or macrogreens. It's a type of gardening, and I'll do a video about that. But somebody said, hey, Pimpy, could you do me a favor and vlog your journey? Because I want to see how it goes. I'm sure there's going to be other people out there who'd be interested in possibly an alternative form of generating income. So that's what I'm going to do, you guys. I'm going to create a category, and you guys could just watch me along my journey and see how it goes. Now, of course, I already grabbed some red worms. There was a lady here locally. She posted that she had a bunch of red wigglers that she wanted to get rid of, which are perfect composting worms. And so she gave me about 250 of them. I grabbed them, and I bought a container that you can use for the bedding, but we'll get more into that as I go along and show you what I'm learning and what it is that I'm feeding them and how my progress goes along. The hard part's making sure the worms stay. The hard part's making sure the worms stay happy. Before I get started, I do want to encourage you to hit the thumbs up button, and if you're not a subscriber, please do so, because when you do, it helps out the channel, and I certainly do appreciate it. As you're aware, if you're thinking about buying gold and silver, and you should, go check out our friends over there at Monumental Exchange. The link is down below in the description. If you're a first-time buyer and you spend more than $100, use promo code Pimpy, P-I-M-P-Y, and you will get a free half ounce of silver. This gentleman's local to me. His name is Jack, and I've seen him get interviewed by a ton of different people. And in case you don't know his life story, he was an airplane pilot. Somehow came across worm farming, got interested in it, and then bought the worm farm for the guy, and now has created an empire out of it. This right here is where all his worms are. He has his worms kept in a fairly simplistic looking shelter. He does have a process about how he feeds them, because you have to be careful. For those of you who are not familiar with this, there's a lot of nitrogen inside cow manure, and so if you put the cow manure on too soon, or the horse manure, you can kill the worms, because you can fry them. It actually heats up. So he has a whole process. He actually shows people what he does. So he is leading the revolution on trying to talk farmers into moving away from using traditional manure and start using worm castings as a form of fertilizer and feed, which is way more healthier for the environment, by the way. So let's just listen a little bit about what Jack has to say, and I'm sure you'll be interested.
Hi, I'm Jack Chambers. You're at Sonoma Valley Worm Farm in Sonoma, California, on a little bit of a nicely misty day. How did I go from being a pilot to having a worm farm? I had a big garden in town, and a friend said I should come out to the worm farm, and he told me where it was, and he said, it's a mess, but you need to see it. So I came out and I bought a 5-gallon bucket of worms, and I took it and put it in my compost pile, and I went on a 5-day trip. Came back, and the compost pile has been transformed by these worms. And I came back out and talked to the guy who was in his 70s, and I asked him if I could work with him. And 3 months later, I asked him if I could buy the property. And 2 weeks later, he said yes. 3 days later, we'd sold our house, and we had a worm farm. So what we're going to do here is take a look at the worms. We just fed today, so they're still down a little bit. But so you can see, look at the difference in the color. So they've been working on this material, how it's brown and darker, and this is newly fed material. So you can see how they've already put their castings into this material that's just 3 or 4 inches down. When worms travel through a soil, they're adding fertility to the soils. So the more I found out about the worms, what I came to realize, it took me a while, but...
You hear what he's saying? The worms actually rejuvenate the soil. You know, we hear this all the time from these climate people that the environment's getting damaged with this, the environment's getting damaged that by farmers and cows and horses, but worms actually rejuvenate the soil. The funny thing is, I knew about worms and worm castings to be used as fertilizer because marijuana growing. You know, I was a grower. The funny thing is, I don't actually smoke it. To me, growing the plants was a form of therapy. I gave it away. We had a lot of friends on our street that had cancer, and so I would grow it on their behalf and just give it to them. But I used the worm castings. It's way better for the soil, and it was healthier for the plants, and it increased my yields on the plants by over 30%. So I was already familiar with worms and worm castings, but I never thought about it on a much larger scale until recently.
I realized that the worms are just the workers, and the real value is in the vermicompost, is in the finished product. That's what you like to see when you get a handful of worms, is something like that.
What kind of worms are they?
Icinia fetida, red wigglers, ubiquitous all over the world, and they're, as this world expert said, they're a tough worm. It's all about food, actually. It's about helping people grow better food. Think globally, act locally kind of deal.
A friend of mine a little while back, I turned him on to the whole worm casting for farming. He has his own personal garden, and he actually grew tomatoes using it. He wanted to test it out, and it was a huge difference between the plants that he used, the worm castings versus the ones he didn't. First of all, the roots were way more healthier, way more bigger, and the tomatoes were much bigger and redder, and they were really good. And I hate tomatoes except for in sauce, by the way. But I was actually eating them raw. They tasted really, really different. They tasted good, very sweet. But you could taste the difference in the food when you do gardening as well. It's much better tasting.
We've been sending out about 2,000 pounds of worms for the last 22 years. So we take the blade all the way up to the end of the bin, and then we bring it back like this. And then we take this material and put it through the sifter, a 1/4-inch screen, and that gives us our finished vermicompost. And so what someone will do now is they'll take a handful of this and put it in a vine as they're planting a vine.
See what he's showing you? That amount right there, when you want to plant a plant, that's all it takes, that right there.
It adds vitality and nutrition, disease suppression, and it helps the vines get off to a real good start. The worm bed is not just for worms. There's lots of creatures in the worm bed along with the worms. So it's a whole biological process. Regular compost adds material back into the soil, which is a great thing, and you'll get some microbes working on that. But what happens is as the worms eat the compost, it goes through their gut and picks up this very rich microbial soup. Our production process, it's like a lot of things in life. It's like watching a guy hit a home run. It looks simple, and it sounds simple. We get separated dairy solids from an organic dairy out in West County.
But look at how much of these worm castings that Jack sells, that he's selling bags that big. So farmers are picking up on this, and they're starting to use this. It's going to change the way the farming industry is done.
We bring it here, we pre-compost it for a period of time. You want to go over and see the garden?
Yeah, take a walk.
Okay. You know, they don't know the exact mechanism that makes it so good, but it's probably a plant growth hormone, plant growth regulator, the microbial mix. And it's like nature doing its best and making its best. All of the best soils in the world, I think, are enriched with worms. One conference I said that worms are going to revolutionize agriculture. And it sounded kind of crazy back in 2003, but now I think we're almost there. People are really starting to step up and say, hey, this is an amazing product.
So there you have it. As I go along, I'm hoping to interview some of these experts out there so you have an opportunity to hear from them directly. I mean, there's a 5 billion YouTube videos out there regarding worming, and everybody has their own opinions. You have one group of people saying, make sure your worms go left. No, make sure your worms go right. I mean, it's all over the map. What I'm going to do is only talk about what works best for me, and it's up to you from there, what you want to do with the information. My thought is that depending on where you are, everything is different. Jack is a person I'm looking forward to actually meeting and interviewing, is what I'm hoping, as well as the gentleman from the Organic Rose. In case you haven't heard of him, this gentleman that owns a restaurant here in California, it's called the Organic Rose. Everything that they serve is grown there, whether it's chickens, ducks, turkeys, whatever. It's not just that, but all their vegetables and fruits are homegrown. So everything that you eat is grown right there at its location, which means everything that you eat is extremely fresh. And I love that idea. I mean, it's something to think about. I've been tossing the idea around doing something similar to what the Organic Rose is doing. So there are different ways to generate income or supplement income that I'm hoping to bring to you that can help you out, okay? I know there's people out there that are struggling a little bit, but if you can work less and make more, then that can't be a bad thing now, can it? Anyways, I'm looking forward to bringing this information to you. A shout out to Rice, who encouraged me to do the vlogs. And so that's what I'm looking forward to doing. And I hope you guys will join me on this journey. I will make a playlist that's separate specifically for worm farming and then everything else that it comes along with. I look forward to having you join me along on this journey. I appreciate you tuning in. I'll catch you later. I'm out.